It's time for another chess refutation. This is Coach Robert with the refutation for the Damiano Defense. I really don't understand what the deal is with this Damiano Defense, which starts with e4, e5, knight f3, and f6. Because this is one of the oldest openings since the early 1600s when the rules that we currently use in chess were more or less finalized over the whole world. Before that, rules were not that standard. But around that time, this guy Damiano apparently got this opening named after him. I feel like he really picked like the short straw somehow, because in the very beginning it's like anybody could have any opening bear their name, and you'd want it to be a good opening. But somehow Damiano got this dumpster fire opening named after him. It loses by force for black. I guess the idea for black would be if, white just closed their eyes and didn't do anything, for black to play like d5 and c5 and knight c6, and then the e-pawn is nice and cozy safe. But that's never going to happen because white has a move that more or less wins by force. And this move is knight takes e5. Black actually cannot even take the pawn back. The best move for black is queen e7, but let's take a look at why they shouldn't take the knight, because I think this is the most critical in practice, especially if you're still playing at a level where Damiano Defense makes any appearance. This was one of the first opening refutations that I figured out before I had access to chess computers and stuff when I was learning in high school. And the refutation is something that you can really figure out on your own, because you just play some common sense moves for white. We're going to attack their king. And here, if they play g6, this is a moment where you might want to pause the video and look for a tactic for white. But if you're already familiar with this idea, you'll immediately spot queen takes e5, which wins the rook on h8. There's nothing black can do. They could maybe give you some spiteful checks, but they run out pretty quickly. Like here, even king d1 looks pretty scrumptious. We're next going to play like knight c3 and chase that away. I don't think there's really any danger here. So, g6 is not a critical line, but the line after king e7 is surprisingly interesting. You would think that this bomb cloud-esque move would be like utter garbage and rather banal to even discuss, but after queen takes e5, the best move, king f7, it makes sense to get more pieces involved in the attack. So of course we play bishop c4 check, and if they play king g6, we checkmate them easily. So you might want to stop here and make this an exercise. It takes a couple moves, but I believe in you. We should start with queen f5, which puts the king in a tight spot. And the next best move is h4. And now we're threatening to play d4 with checkmate. So for example, if black plays d5, you might, break into a cold sweat when you notice that your bishop and your queen are hanging, but forcing moves first, right? We play d4, that's check. They have to block because they have no other move. If they play queen g5, we take it and it's checkmate. Now here is where it's actually hard to find a move for white. I don't mean hard to find a move, like you could play various things here. For example, bishop takes g5 is pretty easy. But if you want to finish with panache, you might play queen f7. And the idea here is that whatever black plays, like queen f6, maybe desperately trying to trade queens, the move pawn takes g5 is mate, not just check, it's mate. Same thing with other ordinary moves like this. Not going anywhere. It's double check from the rook and the pawn, and that's why they can't do anything about it. So they lose by force in this line, and that's pretty fun. And if you are sort of a recent arrival on the chess scene, you might even win some games in this way. And if you're interested in seeing this again, you could search for the games of a guy named Joaquino Greco. I'll put it in the messages. Or you can see my tribute to Greco. I made a whole video about the guy. He played several variations from this position back in the early 1600s. So anyway, the best move for black here is not king g6, which loses by force. I mean, they all lose by force, but they should at least lose in a tricky way. d5, sacrificing a pawn in order to complete development. So here we take with the bishop. We don't want to take with the pawn because then we lose our initiative. We want to keep attacking. King g6. And here we can't go for that same queen f5 nonsense because the bishop is now covering that spot, so we don't want to go there. But we still want to play h4 because that threatens mate in the same way as in the other sideline. And here black can play either h6 or h5, and they're very similar. So I'm going to play h5 because I think this gives black the greatest chances of being really tricky. Because white's idea of playing h5 is thwarted. So what's going to happen now? This is a good moment to pause and see if you can solve this as a tactics puzzle. I remember once someone played this in bullet against me when I was a new chess player, and I timed out in this position with white because I realized that the attack has stalled. There's no checkmate, and I didn't know what to do. But there is a tactic, and it hinges on the idea that we still want to play queen f5, followed by king h6 and then d4. That would be winning, right? So we want to make that happen. We should play bishop takes b7. This deflects the bishop. If they take it, we play queen f5. So just to show, we go ahead with this whole attacking motif. And then here we can finish like how we like. So the best move for black here, and I think this is what confused me in that bullet game, is that they can play the move bishop d6, and now the queen is hanging and the bishop's hanging. And you might think all is lost, but no, all is not lost, because they still can't take this no matter where you put the queen, as long as your queen is connected to the square f5. So if we just keep looking around, we're like, ooh, where do I put that queen? What's a square that is still looking at the f5 square, so they can't take my bishop? And then there's a5. That's the best spot. And they can't attack the queen here. There's no way to develop a tempo here, so black is totally busted. They're going to lose that rook. Too bad, so sad. Winner, winner, chicken dinner for white. So that's the refutation of that line. So let's actually turn and look at something that has received less attention. The fact that black ought to play the move queen e7 because pawn takes e5 is losing. So this makes it sort of a gambit. But you might be tempted even to say that maybe black is okay because they're going to win their pawn back after knight f3 and queen takes e4, right? Not exactly so, because one of the basic opening principles is that we should probably get all of our pieces out, right? So here black is only moving their queen, and they've played this awful move f6, which just blocks the knight, and long term it makes it hard to castle short, which is the fastest way to castle, because now a bishop on c4, for example, would stop all of that. Now here, white has an option, like very few options, and I say that we do not trade queens because we want to attack the queen with tempo. And this position is surprisingly, well maybe not totally surprisingly, like completely winning for white. There's no like quick tactic or anything like that, but black's development is so bad that white will easily finish, and you don't really need to prepare beyond this point. You're just going to castle and develop your minor pieces and try to attack that king and not let them castle. I think that's very easy to follow. Black can also try to play d5, and I think this is like the main line of this losing opening for black. And here we play d3, just giving that pawn a little bit of support. And if they get ambitious and take the pawn, well, if they don't, they're actually down a pawn, so it's important to check this line for black. But here, instead of playing bishop e2, I prefer the extra option bishop e3. And the reason that I like bishop e3 a little bit more than bishop e2 is that, given the choice, I would like to develop my bishop somewhere like c4 later on in the game. Not now, but later. Maybe after playing knight d2, I'll play bishop c4. You got options. But after bishop e3, you know, it's not really sacrificing any of this bishop's mobility. I'd rather go after the king on the light squares, because that's where the king is right now. Anyway, I consider this opening completely busted. No one should ever play this. I think people who play this in bullet are sadistic or were born about 400 years ago. I hope you like that, and you can look forward to seeing more opening refutations on my channel. Take care, everyone.